Black Maid thought the millionaire wanted her for him, but he gave her a name and a future. Most rich men who called for emergency cleaning at 2 a.m. wanted one thing. Talia knew the game. 3 years of night shifts at the historic battery and had taught her to keep her eyes down, clean fast, and get out before things got complicated. But when Lucas Harlan opened the door to Suite 412, everything she thought she knew about wealthy guests shattered. Have you ever walked into someone's worst moment and felt compelled to stay? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She knocked on room 412 expecting another drunk businessman with whiskey stains and wandering hands. Instead, she found a millionaire having a breakdown, and for once she didn't look away. Have you ever walked into someone's worst moment and felt compelled to stay? Have you ever seen someone powerful completely broken and wondered if you should run or reach out? That's exactly what happened to Talia Benson on a humid Charleston night that would change everything. Most rich men who called for emergency cleaning at 2 a.m. wanted one thing. Talia knew the game. 3 years of night shifts at the historic battery and had taught her to keep her eyes down, clean fast, and get out before things got complicated. But when Lucas Harlan opened the door to Suite 412, everything she thought she knew about wealthy guests shattered. His usually perfect hair hung in messy strands. Designer shirt wrinkled and partially unbuttoned. Papers scattered across the antique desk like a tornado had hit. The smell of expensive whiskey hung heavy in the air, but his glass sat barely touched on the nightstand. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice shaking. "I'm sorry for the late hour." "Sorry?" Talia blinked. In 3 years, no guest had ever apologized for calling her to work. She stepped inside, wheeling her cart past him, trying not to notice how his hands trembled as he closed the door. The room looked like a crime scene. Documents everywhere. A laptop screen cracked down the middle. Cushions from the leather sofa thrown on the floor. But there was no evidence of a party, no signs of the usual rich man chaos she was used to cleaning up. "What happened here?" she asked before she could stop herself. He laughed, but the sound came out broken. Life happened here. Talia had learned to read men fast. Predators had a certain look. Players had another. But this man looked like someone had reached into his chest and torn something vital out. She'd seen that look before. In her own mirror, the night they told her she couldn't afford nursing school. She started gathering papers, not reading them, just making neat stacks. His breathing was too fast, too shallow. The kind of breathing that came before panic attacks. She knew because she'd had plenty of her own. "Sit down," she said gently. "You're about to pass out." He obeyed without argument, sinking onto the edge of the bed. She poured water from the crystal pitcher into a glass and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed for just a second, but she felt the tremor in his hands. "Whatever it is," she said, surprising herself with her own boldness, "it'll pass. Everything passes eventually." He looked up at her then, really looked. Not at her uniform or her name tag or the things that mark her as service. He looked at her face, her eyes, like he was seeing an actual person instead of just a help. "What would you do if you saw someone powerful completely broken? Would you stay or walk away? Tell me in the comments." As she turned to leave, he whispered something that stopped her cold. "Please don't go." "Not yet." 3 words that shouldn't have mattered from a stranger. But his voice cracked like a boy's, and against every instinct screaming danger, she set down her cleaning cart. She stayed because broken looked the same on millionaires as it did on everyone else. Raw, desperate, and achingly human. "I'm not supposed to be here this long," Talia said, but she didn't move toward the door. Something about the way he held that water glass, like it was keeping him anchored to earth, made her forget every rule about dealing with guests. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I haven't talked to another person in 3 days. Real conversation, I mean. Not business calls or meetings where everyone tells me what they think I want to hear." Talia studied his face. Mid-30s, maybe older. The kind of bone structure that belonged in magazines. But his eyes looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleepless nights. She'd seen that exhaustion before. In her mother's face during the worst of her illness. In her own reflection after 16-hour workdays. "What's your name?" she asked, settling onto the chair across from the bed. Professional distance, but not running. "David," he said quickly. Too quickly. She raised an eyebrow. "David?" A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "You don't believe me." "Honey, I've been cleaning hotel rooms since I was 19. I know when someone's lying about their name." He was quiet for a long moment, rolling the water glass between his palms. Charleston's gas lamps flickered through the plantation shutters, casting moving shadows across his face like secrets trying to escape. "Lucas," he said finally. "My name is Lucas." "Better." She leaned back in the chair. "I'm Talia. And before you ask, yes, it's my real name." Something shifted in his expression when she said it, like he was tasting the word, storing it somewhere safe. "Talia," he repeated softly. The way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. Not the usual wariness she felt around male guests, but something warmer, more dangerous. "So what happened here, Lucas? Did someone die? Lose a fortune? Wife leave you?" "All of the above," he said, but there was dark humor in it now instead of despair. "Well, not the wife part. Never been married. But the rest." He gestured at the scattered papers. "Let's just say I found out today that the people I trusted most have been stealing from me for years." Talia winced. She knew about betrayal, about trusting the wrong people with the wrong things and paying for it later. "Business partners? My brother, my CFO, my lawyer." His voice went flat. The holy trinity of people who should have my back, apparently deciding my back was the perfect place to stick their knives. "When was the last time you showed kindness to someone who couldn't repay you? Share your moment below." She watched him struggle with the words, saw how much it cost him to admit he'd been played. Rich or poor, being stabbed by family hurt the same way. "I clean up messes for a living," she said softly. "Sometimes that means more than just spills." His eyes met hers across the space between them, and for a moment, the expensive room fell away. Two people who understood what it meant to be disappointed by the world, finding each other in the middle of a Charleston night. When he asked her name again, she almost lied. Hotel policy, self-preservation, all the rules she'd built to stay invisible. But something in his eyes made her whisper the truth. "Talia." He repeated it like a prayer, and she realized with terrifying clarity that she just handed him the one thing she'd kept sacred, her real self. By the third emergency cleaning request in 4 days, she knew he wasn't calling about spills. The question was, what did he really want from her? "Room service again, Mr. Harlan." Talia stood in the doorway of 412, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. "Let me guess. You accidentally knocked over your coffee cup, and somehow it exploded across the entire room." Lucas had the grace to look embarrassed. He'd called down a housekeeping 20 minutes ago, claiming he'd made a mess with his breakfast. But Talia could see his untouched room service tray sitting perfectly organized on the table by the window. "Okay," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You caught me. Honey, I caught you 3 days ago. The question is why you keep calling me up here when we both know you don't need anything cleaned." She stepped inside, but left her cart in the hallway. No point pretending this was about housekeeping anymore. Charleston's morning light streamed through the tall windows, painting everything gold and warm. Too intimate for whatever game they were playing. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped between his knees like a kid called to the principal's office. "I like talking to you. You like talking to me." She repeated his words slowly, tasting them for lies. Rich men don't collect maids for conversation, Lucas. They collect them for other things. Something flashed across his face, hurt, maybe anger. "I'm not other men. Prove it." The challenge hung between them like a dare. Talia had learned early that the best defense was a good offense. Push first before they could push you. Make them show their cards before you revealed your own. But instead of getting defensive or making demands, Lucas did something unexpected. He laughed, not mocking or bitter, but genuine amusement. "You don't make anything easy, do you? Easy gets you hurt," she said simply. He stood up, moving to the window that overlooked Charleston's historic district. Morning was painting the old buildings soft colors, making everything look like a postcard. But Talia kept her eyes on him, watching for tells, for signs of what he really wanted. My mother cleaned houses, he said quietly. Starting when I was 8. Rich families in Connecticut who treated her like furniture. I used to watch her come home exhausted, dignity stripped away bit by bit, day by day. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's attention felt too good to be true? How did you handle it? Talia felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the confession she'd expected. Why are you telling me this? Because I see her in you sometimes. The way you hold yourself. The way you don't apologize for existing in spaces that weren't built for you. He turned from the window to face her. And I need you to know, I would never, ever treat you the way those people treated her. On Thursday night, there was no spill. No excuse. Just him sitting on the bed's edge, hands clasped, looking up at her with something that terrified her more than lust ever could. I need to tell you something, he said, about who I really am. The truth was about to change everything. She thought she knew men, their hunger, their games, their inevitable disappointment. But Lucas Harlan was something she'd never encountered, a man afraid of his own power. Lucas Harlan, Talia repeated, the name tasting foreign on her tongue. As in Harlan Technologies? The software company that's worth. She stopped, numbers too big to comprehend swirling in her head. $1.5 billion, he finished quietly. Give or take. The room suddenly felt smaller. Or maybe she felt smaller. The expensive furniture that had seemed elegant now felt like props in a play she didn't understand. Charleston's historic charm, visible through the windows, now looked like the view from a castle tower. Him looking down at the peasants below. You're him. Her voice came out flat, emotionless. You're the tech guy, the one they write articles about in magazines. I'm still the same person who had a breakdown in this room 4 nights ago. No. She backed toward the door, every alarm bell in her head ringing. No, you're not. You're a billionaire who's been playing dress-up, pretending to be normal, pretending to need a maid's sympathy. Lucas stood, but didn't move toward her. Smart one. She was 2 seconds from bolting, and they both knew it. I never pretended to be normal, he said. I told you I was broken. Money doesn't fix that. Money fixes everything. The words came out sharp, cutting. Money fixes sick mothers and college tuition and rent that's 2 months behind. Money fixes the kinds of problems people like me have. People like you, black girls from the wrong side of Charleston who clean toilets for a living. She grabbed the door handle. Don't act like you don't know what I am. I know exactly what you are. His voice went quiet, intense. You're the woman who stayed with a stranger having the worst night of his life. You're the person who saw someone in pain and chose kindness over safety. You're someone who works 3 jobs to take care of her mother and still finds energy to comfort people she barely knows. Talia's hand froze on the door handle. This wasn't going the way these conversations usually went. Rich men didn't catalog her good qualities. They cataloged what they wanted to take. You think money changes what I see when I look at you? He asked. You think it changes what you made me feel the first night? How would you react if someone you were falling for turned out to be completely different than you thought? Share your story. The question hit too close to home. Because the truth was, she'd felt something too. Something she'd been trying to ignore for 4 days. The way he listened when she talked. The way his eyes stayed on her face instead of wandering. The way he said her name like it mattered. But billionaires didn't fall for hotel maids. That was fairy tale nonsense. And she'd stopped believing in fairy tales around the same time she'd started believing in overdue bills. This is crazy, she whispered. I know. I should go. I know. She reached for the door handle, every survival instinct screaming run. But his next words rooted her feet to expensive carpet. My mother was a maid too. For words that shattered every assumption she'd built about rich men and the women they used. The richest man she'd ever met had calloused hands and memories that matched her own. Proof that money couldn't erase where you came from, only where you were going. Connecticut, Lucas said, settling back on the bed like he was preparing for a long story. My mom cleaned houses for families in Greenwich. Old money types who acted like she was invisible. Talia's hand fell away from the door handle. She'd been ready to run, but something in his voice made her pause. Pain, recognizing pain. I used to go with her sometimes during summer break. 8 years old, sitting in kitchen corners while she scrubbed other people's bathrooms. These families had more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes, but they'd count the silver after she left. They thought she was stealing. They thought we all were. Came with the territory. He held up his hands, palms toward her. See these? Talia looked closer. Faint white lines across his knuckles. Small scars on his forearms. The kind that came from childhood accidents and grown-up fights. Free lunch program at school meant kids knew you were poor. Fighting was easier than explaining why my sneakers had holes or why I wore the same 3 shirts all week. Something loosened in Talia's chest. She recognized those scars, that shame. Different details, same story. Charleston morning light streamed through the windows, warming the space between them as she realized maybe the distance between their worlds wasn't about money. Maybe it was about who had the courage to bridge it. My mom worked herself to death, she said, surprising herself by sharing. 3 jobs, no insurance, diabetes she couldn't afford to manage properly. I was 19 when she had her first heart attack. Third one killed her. The words came out matter of fact, but Lucas heard the pain underneath. That's when I learned that working hard doesn't guarantee anything except being tired. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing her loss. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be grateful you made it out. We both made it out. You made it out, she corrected. I'm still here, cleaning up after people who'll never see me as anything more than the help. Lucas stood and moved to the small table where he'd left his breakfast untouched. But instead of sitting down to eat, he started clearing the dishes himself, rolling up his expensive sleeves, stacking plates like he'd done 1,000 times before. Do you believe people can truly understand each other across different backgrounds? What helped you connect with someone different from you? What are you doing? Talia asked. Helping. That's my job. Not today. She watched him work, movements efficient and practiced. This wasn't some rich boy playing at being humble. This was muscle memory from a childhood spent helping his mother clean up after other people. When he rolled up his sleeves to help her clean, actually clean, not pretend, she saw them, small scars on his forearms, the kind that came from childhood hunger and grown-up fights. We're not so different, he said quietly. But as she stared at those scars, one terrifying thought bloomed. What if he was right? She came to work that Thursday night planning to quit. Instead, she found him waiting with a bottle of wine and a question that would change both their lives. What if we stopped pretending this is about cleaning? Talia stood in the doorway of room 412, taking in a scene that definitely wasn't standard hotel housekeeping. Candles flickered on the antique desk. 2 wine glasses sat beside an expensive bottle she didn't recognize. The scattered papers and chaos from their first meeting were gone, replaced by something that looked almost romantic. What is this? She asked, but her voice came out softer than she'd intended. Honest conversation, Lucas said, standing by the window. He'd traded his usual designer clothes for jeans and a simple white shirt. Casual looked good on him, dangerous good. I came here to tell you I can't do this anymore. She stayed in the doorway, using the distance as protection. Whatever this is we've been doing, it has to stop. Because I told you who I am, because you didn't tell me who you are. For a week, you let me think you were just some sad businessman hiding from his problems. You let me feel sorry for you. Lucas moved away from the window, but stopped when he saw her tense. I never wanted your pity. Then what did you want? You. The word hung between them like a confession. From the first night, when you stayed instead of running. When you looked at me like I was a person instead of a bank account or a business opportunity. I wanted more of that. More of you. Talia's grip tightened on the doorframe. She'd prepared for a lot of things tonight. Anger, dismissal, maybe even crude propositions. But honesty? That was harder to defend against. Rich men don't want girls like me for anything real, she said. I'm not rich men. I'm just Lucas, the guy whose mother cleaned houses. The guy who builds software because solving problems is easier than solving feelings. The guy who hasn't had a real conversation with anyone in months until you knocked on this door. The candles cast moving shadows on the walls, making the whole room feel like it was breathing. Charleston's evening sounds drifted through the windows. Horse-drawn carriages, laughter from the bars, the distant sound of jazz music. The city was alive outside while inside, time felt suspended. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know. I could lose my job. I know. You could have anyone. Models, actresses, women who understand your world. I don't want anyone else." He took a step closer, and this time she didn't back away. "I want the woman who saw me at my worst and chose compassion. I want the person who calls me on my lies and makes me laugh even when everything's falling apart. What does it feel like when someone sees past your defenses to the person you really are? Share that moment if you're comfortable." Talia felt her carefully built walls starting to crack. 6 days of fighting an attraction that made no sense, of telling herself she was reading too much into kind words and genuine attention. But the way he looked at her now, like she was precious instead of disposable, made it hard to remember why she was supposed to run. "If I stay," she said quietly, "if we do this, what happens tomorrow? What happens when you get bored or your friends find out, or you remember that I'm just a help? Then I'll spend every day proving you wrong about who I am." He held out his hand, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. "What if we stop pretending this is about cleaning?" When he kissed her, it wasn't possession, it was invitation. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her lips. Her answer came not in words, but in the way she pulled him closer, finally letting someone pass the walls she'd built to survive. Afterward, as she lay in his arms watching sunrise paint the walls gold, her phone buzzed. Text from her supervisor. Someone had reported suspicious activity in 412. Her job, her mother's insurance, her carefully built life, all of it was about to come crashing down. She'd survived poverty, racism, and disappointment, but she wasn't prepared for the one thing that terrified her most: hope. The hotel manager's office felt like a courtroom at 7 a.m. Mrs. Patterson sat behind her desk in a suit that probably cost more than Talia, made in a month, fingers steepled, expression carved from ice. "Excessive time spent in guest rooms," she read from clipboard. "Inappropriate fraternization with guests. Multiple reports of unprofessional behavior." Talia kept her spine straight, chin up. She'd known this was coming the moment she'd chosen to stay in room 412 longer than duty required. But knowing didn't make the humiliation easier to swallow. "Multiple reports?" she asked. "Who's been watching me?" "That's not relevant. What's relevant is that your behavior has been completely inappropriate for a member of our housekeeping staff." Through the office windows, Charleston was waking up. Early morning joggers and dog walkers starting their day while hers was ending. 3 years of reliable work, perfect attendance, commendations from guests. None of it mattered now. "I'm being fired for talking to a guest. You're being terminated for conduct unbefitting the standards of this establishment." Mrs. Patterson's voice could have frozen hell. "Clean out your locker. Security will escort you out." That's when the office door opened and Lucas walked in like he owned the place, which Talia realized with sinking dread. He probably could if he wanted to. "Mrs. Patterson." His voice carried the kind of authority that came with unlimited bank accounts. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "Mr. Harlan." The manager's tone shifted from ice to honey in seconds. "I wasn't aware you were concerned with our staffing decisions. I'm concerned when excellent employees are punished for providing exceptional service." Talia wanted to disappear into the floor. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, being seen as the kept woman, the employee who'd slept her way to protection. Every person in this room would know exactly what kind of service he was talking about. "I don't need you to save me," she said, finding her voice. "I need you to believe I can save myself." Lucas turned to her, surprise flickering across his face. But she was already standing, already walking toward the door. "Talia, wait." "No." She spun around, months of frustration boiling over. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You swooping in like some knight in expensive armor, fixing my problems with your money and connections. But what happens next week when you're bored? Next month when the novelty wears off? I'm still going to be me, and you're still going to be you. Have you ever had to choose between love and independence? How did you handle it?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of Mrs. Patterson's antique clock. Charleston morning light streamed through windows that suddenly felt more like prison bars than portals to freedom. "I'll clean out my locker," Talia said finally. "But I'm doing it on my own." As she cleaned out her locker, Lucas appeared with an envelope. Not money, she realized with relief, but something else entirely. "It's not what you think," he said. Inside was a business card with her name and a title that made her knees weak: Community Health Advocate. The foundation he'd never mentioned was offering her a job. The question was this opportunity or manipulation? The job offer should have been a dream come true. Instead, it felt like the most elegant trap ever set, lined with good intentions and baited with her own ambitions. Community Health Advocate, Talia read aloud, staring at the business card like it might explode. The Harlan Foundation for Health Equity. She looked up at Lucas, who was leaning against his car in the hotel parking lot. "How long have you been planning this?" "The foundation's been in development for months," he said carefully. "But the position, I created that after I met you." "Created it." She repeated the words slowly, tasting them for lies. "You created a job. For me. Because we've been sleeping together. I created it because you're passionate about healthcare access. Because you know these communities better than any consultant I could hire. Because you have ideas that could actually help people." The parking lot was empty except for them and the morning maintenance crew. Charleston was fully awake now. Traffic building on the nearby streets, the city getting on with business while her life hung in the balance. "This is charity," she said. "It's a job, with a salary, benefits, actual responsibilities. Funded by your guilt about getting me fired." Lucas pushed off from the car, frustration finally showing. "I didn't get you fired. Your supervisor got you fired because she couldn't stand the idea of the help talking to the guests like equals." "Don't." Talia held up a hand. "Don't make this about race or class or anything else. Make it about what it really is, you using your money to control my life. Now, is offering you a job controlling your life? Because now I owe you everything." The words exploded out of her. 3 years of swallowed pride and careful politeness finally breaking free. "My job, my future, my ability to take care of myself. All of it depends on your continued interest in keeping me around." A delivery truck rumbled past, the driver honking at something in the distance. Normal people doing normal jobs, not standing in parking lots arguing about the impossible math of love across economic divides. When someone tries to help, how do you know if it's genuine or if there's an agenda? Share your thoughts. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was seeing something new. "What if I told you the job comes with no strings attached? That even if we never speak again after today, the position is still yours?" I'd say you're either lying or naive. "And what if I told you I'd rather lose you than have you stay because you feel trapped?" That stopped her. She'd been ready for arguments, for pressure, for the kind of manipulation she'd learned to expect from men with power. But this sounded like someone willing to let her go if that's what it took to prove his intentions were real. The foundation documents told a different story than she'd imagined. Not charity, but justice. Not pity, but partnership. And at the bottom of the proposal, in his handwriting, "For every night you taught me that kindness isn't weakness." But before she could process what this meant, her phone rang. Her mother had collapsed. When her mother hit the hospital floor, Talia learned the difference between a man who says he loves you and a man who shows up at 3 a.m. without being asked. The call came while she was reviewing foundation documents in her apartment. Her neighbor's panicked voice cut through the night. "Talia, your mama collapsed. We're at Charleston General." She grabbed her keys with shaking hands, but before she could reach the door, it opened. Lucas stood there, still in his suit from a late meeting, car keys already in his hand. "I heard," he said simply. "Let's go." Have you ever had someone show up in your darkest moment without being asked? Someone who just knew you needed them? That's what real partnership looks like. Hit that like button if you've experienced that kind of support. The hospital corridors stretched endlessly under harsh fluorescent bulbs. Charleston's humid night pressed against windows like worry itself. Talia's sneakers squeaked against polished floors as they rushed toward the emergency room. Her mother lay connected to monitors, breathing shallow but steady. The doctor spoke in careful medical terms about exhaustion, stress, and a need for better care. Talia heard the words but felt the weight. More bills, more time off work, more impossibilities stacking up. "We'll handle it," Lucas said quietly to the doctor. "Whatever she needs." Talia turned to protest, but he caught her hand. "This isn't charity. This is family." The word hit her like a physical blow. Family. When had anyone claimed her that way? Do you know someone who treats your family like their own? Someone who doesn't just say they care, but proves it when it matters? Share your story in the comments below. Hours later, after her mother stabilized and fell into peaceful sleep, they found themselves alone in the family waiting room. Exhaustion and relief created a dangerous combination. The sterile space felt intimate in the way that crisis makes everything feel sacred. "I was so scared," she whispered against his chest. "I know." His hands found her face, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. "But she's okay. You're okay." When she kissed him, it carried the desperation of someone who'd almost lost everything and the gratitude of someone who'd found something worth keeping. The waiting room disappeared. The hospital sounds faded. There was only him, only this moment, only the certainty that love could survive anything. His hands tangled in her hair as she pulled him closer, needing to feel alive after hours of fearing death. They made love right there on the uncomfortable couch, quiet and urgent, celebrating survival and connection in the way humans have always done when faced with mortality. "I love you," she breathed against his neck as they held each other afterward. "I love you too," he whispered back. "All of you. Your strength, your stubbornness, your beautiful heart." As they left the hospital together, her mother squeezed Lucas's hand from her wheelchair. "Take care of my baby," she whispered. His response stopped Talia's heart. She's been taking care of everyone else her whole life. It's time someone took care of her. For the first time, letting someone love her didn't feel like losing herself. It felt like coming home. But what happened next would test everything they'd built together. She'd spent years cleaning up other people's messes. Now, she was building something that would prevent them in the first place. The foundation offices buzzed with purpose on a Tuesday morning in October. Charleston's historic charm blended perfectly with their modern mission, past and future merging like the two worlds Talia and Lucas had brought together. "Mrs. Patterson needs help with her diabetes medication," Talia reported during their weekly meeting. "And the Johnson family still can't afford their son's asthma treatments." Lucas nodded, making notes. "What about the clinic partnership? Are they ready to expand hours?" Watching him take her lead felt surreal. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible, cleaning rooms while rich guests ignored her existence. Now she was running programs that changed lives. What would you build if you had unlimited resources to solve a problem you've experienced? Think about it and share your vision in the comments. Your idea might inspire someone else to take action. Their relationship had deepened through shared purpose. Love wasn't just about romance anymore. It was about building something bigger than themselves. Every family they helped, every crisis they solved together, strengthened the bond between them. Late that evening, after the last volunteer had gone home, they found themselves alone in the conference room. Charts and photos covered the walls. Faces of families they'd helped, statistics showing lives improved, plans for expanding their reach. "Look what we built," Lucas said, pulling her close. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her back. "We're just getting started." The kiss began soft, but quickly turned hungry. 6 months of working together had created a different kind of intimacy, partnership that made physical connection even more intense. They made love on the conference table, surrounded by evidence of their shared dreams, claiming the space as truly theirs. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered afterward, tracing patterns on his chest. "What? The foundation?" "No." She looked up at him. "A partner. Someone who sees the same problems I see and wants to fix them together. Have you ever found someone who shares your deepest values? Someone who doesn't just support your dreams, but helps build them? That's the foundation of lasting love." Their first community meeting drew over 100 people. Talia stood at the podium, looking out at faces she'd known since childhood. Neighbors who'd watched her struggle, friends who'd seen her mother's health decline, people who'd whispered about her relationship with a rich man. "This foundation isn't charity," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "It's justice. It's what happens when we refuse to accept that some lives matter less than others." The applause was thunderous. Lucas watched from the back, pride radiating from his smile. But success brought new challenges. A local news producer called that afternoon. "We want to interview Charleston's unlikely power couple." The words sent ice through Talia's veins. Being public meant her past, her struggles, her most private moments would become headlines. The question wasn't whether she was ready for fame. It was whether their love could survive the scrutiny. Going public with their relationship meant the world would see her the way she'd always feared, the maid who seduced the millionaire. But Lucas saw something else entirely, the woman who taught him that love wasn't a transaction. The TV studio felt like a courtroom. Harsh lights created shadows that seemed designed to reveal every flaw. Charleston stretched beyond the windows, a reminder of where they'd started, but every question felt like a test of their foundation. "So, Talia," the host leaned forward with a practiced smile, "how did a hotel Maid end up running $1 million foundation?" The question hit exactly where it was aimed, at her worth, her qualifications, her right to be there. "I didn't end up anywhere," Talia replied calmly. "I earned my place by understanding the problems we're solving. You can't help people if you've never walked in their shoes." Lucas's hand found hers under the table, steady and warm. "And Lucas, critics say you're just another rich man with a savior complex. How do you respond?" "They're wrong," he said simply. "Talia saved me, not the other way around. She taught me that real wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give." How do you handle criticism of your relationship choices? What helps you stay confident when others question your decisions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The interview felt endless. Questions about their age difference, their backgrounds, whether their foundation was legitimate or just an expensive way to justify an inappropriate relationship. Each one designed to make them smaller, to reduce their love story to scandal. But they answered together, hands linked, voices steady. They'd faced worse than cameras and judgment. "Final question," the host said. "What's next for Charleston's power couple?" Talia looked directly into the camera. "We're going to keep helping families. That's what this has always been about." Back at the foundation, they watched the interview air with their core team. The phone started ringing immediately. Some call supportive, others cruel, most curious about their services. But one call changed everything. "I saw your story." A woman's voice shook through the phone. "I'm a single mother. Can't afford my daughter's medication. Can you help?" It was the first of hundreds. That night, in their shared apartment, they celebrated the only way that mattered. Lucas carried her to their bedroom, his hands reverent as he undressed her, as if she were something precious that needed protecting. "Let them talk," he breathed against her neck as they moved together. "We know what this is." Their lovemaking carried new intensity, not just desire but defiance. Every touch was a statement. We belong together. Every kiss was a promise. We're stronger than their doubts. "I'm not ashamed," she whispered as they lay tangled afterward. "Of what?" "Any of it. Where I came from, what I did, who I love." She traced his jawline with her finger. "They want me to feel small, but I don't. Not anymore." The interview aired to mixed reactions, but the foundation's phone kept ringing. Their love story had become a lifeline for others. Proof that change was possible, that love could bridge any gap, that ordinary people could create extraordinary impact. What they didn't know was that their biggest test was still coming. They thought they were just falling in love. Turns out they were starting a revolution, one family at a time. 6 months after the interview, the foundation occupied an entire building in downtown Charleston. What had started as a small operation to help with medical bills had grown into a comprehensive support system. Job training, child care, mental health services, and emergency assistance. Talia's days began at sunrise and ended well past midnight. Lucas matched her pace, both of them driven by the constant stream of families needing help. "We're changing an entire system," she said during their morning meeting, reviewing statistics, that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Infant mortality down 12% in our target neighborhoods. High school graduation up 8%. Emergency room visits for preventable conditions down 25%. Lucas studied the charts with the same intensity he'd once reserved for corporate profits. The question is, can we sustain this growth? What's the most meaningful impact you've made in someone's life? How did helping others change you too? Share your story below. Sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest changes. Success brought new pressures. Foundation board meetings, donor events, speaking engagements. Their relationship had to survive constant scrutiny, endless demands on their time, and the weight of hundreds of families depending on them. Some nights, they barely saw each other. "I miss you," Talia said one Thursday evening, catching Lucas in the hallway between his conference call and her community meeting. He pulled her into the supply closet, the only private space available, and kissed her with the desperation of a man starving for connection. "I miss you too." They made love against the supply shelves, quick and urgent, stealing intimacy wherever they could find it. It wasn't romantic, but it was real. Two people fighting to stay connected while serving something bigger than themselves. Their one-year anniversary of meeting approached. Lucas planned a quiet dinner, just the two of them, away from phones and responsibilities. Instead, they found themselves in the emergency room at 2 a.m. with the Rodriguez family. Maria Rodriguez had been cleaning houses for 12 years, supporting 4 children alone after her husband's deportation. Now she lay unconscious from exhaustion and malnutrition, her children terrified in the waiting room. Talia held 8-year-old Sophia while Lucas handled insurance paperwork and hospital administration. They'd done this dance hundreds of times now. Crisis management had become second nature. "Will Mama be okay?" Sophia whispered. "Yes, baby. We're going to make sure of it." As Maria stabilized and her children finally relaxed, Talia realized something profound. This was exactly where she wanted to be. Not at fancy restaurants or romantic getaways, but here, in the middle of other people's emergencies, making a difference that mattered. Lucas appeared beside her, exhaustion and satisfaction written across his face. "Mrs. Rodriguez is stable. Insurance approved extended treatment. Kids can stay with their aunt." "Good." She leaned against him, feeling the solid comfort of partnership. Another family saved. Another day at the office. He smiled, then his expression grew serious. "Talia, I need to ask you something." Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee right there in the hospital waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of disinfectant in the air. "Marry me," he said simply. "Right here, right now. Let's make this official." He proposed in a hospital waiting room at 2 a.m., surrounded by fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. It was perfect. "Are you serious?" Talia stared down at him, aware that a few other families in the waiting area had stopped their quiet conversations to watch. Dead serious. Lucas pulled out a ring, not the massive diamond she might have expected, but something elegant and understated, something that looked like it belonged on her hand. "I've been carrying this for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. But I realized something tonight." "What?" "There is no right moment. There's just right person, right feeling, right life." He took her hand. "Marry me, Talia. Be my partner in everything." The ring slid onto her finger like it had always belonged there. Around them, the other families began to clap, strangers celebrating love in a place usually reserved for worry and fear. Where would your ideal proposal happen? Somewhere fancy or somewhere meaningful to your story? Tell me in the comments what matters more, the setting or the person asking. They celebrated the only way that made sense. In the foundation office, surrounded by pictures of families they'd helped and plans for communities they'd serve, making love as an engaged couple felt different. Not just about them anymore, but about the future they'd build together. "Mrs. Harlan," Lucas whispered against her ear as they lay on the conference room couch afterward. "I like the sound of that," she admitted, surprising herself. 6 months ago, taking his name would have felt like losing herself. Now it felt like gaining something. Partnership, equality, shared purpose. Wedding planning revealed how much their worlds had truly merged. Her mother walked Lucas through family traditions while his parents learned to make her grandmother's cornbread recipe. The guest list included hotel staff who'd become family, foundation clients who'd become friends, and business associates who'd become genuine supporters of their mission. Small wedding, Talia insisted during planning. Just family and people who matter. Define small, Lucas said, reviewing the list that had somehow grown to 200 people. Everyone who helped us get here. The venue chose itself. The historic church where Talia had prayed for her mother's healing, where she'd asked God for strength to survive another day, where she'd never imagined she'd walk down the aisle toward a man who saw her as an equal partner. But 3 days before the wedding, everything they built faced its biggest threat yet. The headline appeared on Friday morning. Foundation under investigation. Misuse of funds alleged. The article quoted anonymous sources claiming financial irregularities, suggested that the foundation was a tax shelter for Lucas's wealth, and implied that Talia was unqualified to run a major charitable organization. By noon, their phones were flooded with calls from donors, board members, and reporters. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate their partnership had become a public relations nightmare. "We can postpone," Lucas said, reading the latest accusations. "Absolutely not." Talia's voice was steel. "We're getting married Sunday. But first, we have a foundation to save." 72 hours before their wedding, a scandal broke that threatened to destroy not just their reputation, but their foundation's ability to help anyone. The allegations came from Marcus Webb, a former board member they'd removed for trying to steer contracts to his own companies. His revenge was calculated and cruel. He leaked financial documents taken out of context, suggesting that Talia was using foundation funds for personal expenses and that Lucas was manipulating tax laws. "It's all lies," Talia said, pacing their apartment while Lucas worked his phone, calling lawyers and accountants. "Every penny is documented. Every decision was board approved. I know that. You know that. But the public doesn't." The Charleston newspaper had picked up the story. Social media exploded with opinions from people who'd never heard of their foundation before, but suddenly had strong feelings about it. The comments ranged from supportive to vicious, but the doubt was spreading. When facing criticism together, what helps a couple stay united? What keeps you strong when the world seems against you? Share your experience with weathering storms in the comments. Saturday morning, they called an emergency press conference. Standing together outside the foundation building, hands linked, they faced a crowd of reporters and cameras that felt more like a firing squad. "The allegations against our foundation are false," Talia said, her voice carrying clearly over the crowd. "Every financial record is available for independent audit. Every program we run has measurable outcomes. Every family we've helped can speak to our impact. Why should we believe you?" a reporter called out. Lucas stepped forward. "Because we're not hiding. We're here, answering questions, providing documentation. If we were guilty of something, will we be planning a wedding tomorrow and inviting you all to see the foundation's work firsthand?" The questions kept coming, each one sharper than the last. But Talia found herself calm in the storm. These people didn't know her story, didn't understand what she'd overcome, didn't recognize the strength that had been built through years of fighting for survival. "I grew up in the neighborhoods we serve," she said, looking directly into the cameras. "I know what it's like to choose between medication and groceries, between rent and utilities. This foundation exists because I lived these problems before I had the resources to solve them." That evening, exhausted but united, they found themselves alone in their apartment for the first time in days. The stress and pressure had brought them closer rather than driving them apart. "Tomorrow," Lucas said, pulling her close, "I marry the strongest person I know." "Tomorrow," she replied, "I marry the man who saw my strength before I believed in it myself." They made love with the intensity of people who'd been tested and found their bond unbreakable. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow spoken before the official ceremony. The phone rang past midnight, Talia's mother calling from the hotel where out-of-town family was staying. "Baby," her mother's voice was warm with satisfaction. "I just watched your press conference online. You stood up there like you own the world. I don't own anything, Mama. You own your truth. You own your dignity. And tomorrow, you're marrying a man who knows the difference between those things and money. As they went to sleep, holding each other close, both knew that whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. Their wedding was 12 hours away. She walked down the aisle of the same Charleston church where she'd prayed for her mother's healing, toward the man who taught her that love multiplies when you give it away. The sanctuary overflowed with an unlikely congregation. Hotel housekeepers sat next to tech executives, foundation clients mixed with board members. Neighborhood kids who called her Miss Talia shared pews with Charleston's social elite. Lucas had been right. Everyone who'd helped them get here filled the space. Her dress was simple but elegant, chosen not to make a statement, but to let her shine through. As she walked toward Lucas, she saw his face transform with wonder, like he couldn't believe she was real, couldn't believe she was his. The scandal hadn't disappeared overnight, but had been overshadowed by something more powerful: truth. 3 independent audits confirmed the foundation's integrity. Families they'd helped spoke publicly about their experiences. The community rally yesterday had drawn over 1,000 supporters. You are here, the minister began, not just to witness a wedding, but to celebrate a partnership that has already changed this community. What's the difference between finding someone to complete you and finding someone who complements you? What does true partnership look like in your relationships? Share your thoughts below. The vows they'd written reflected their journey. No promises about easier times or perfect love, just commitments to face whatever came next together, to use their partnership to serve others, to see each other clearly and love what they found. Talia, Lucas said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, you taught me that love isn't about rescue but recognition. You saw past my wealth to my heart, and you helped me see past your circumstances to your strength. I promise to honor that strength, to support your dreams, and to build our future on the foundation of respect you've taught me. Lucas, she replied, you showed me that letting someone love me didn't mean losing myself. You proved that partnership means standing beside each other, not one in front of the other. I promise to trust you with my vulnerability, to share your burdens, and to keep building something bigger than both of us. The kiss that sealed their marriage carried 2 years of history. Late-night conversations in room 412, foundation meetings that turned into strategy sessions, crisis moments that became bonding experiences, and quiet intimacies that had grown into deep partnership. The reception transformed the foundation building into a celebration space. Instead of expensive floral arrangements, the walls displayed photos of families they'd helped. Instead of a traditional wedding cake, they served desserts from local businesses they'd supported through microgrants. As they danced to their first song as husband and wife, Charleston's skyline glittered beyond the windows like approval from the city that had shaped them both. No regrets, Lucas whispered in her ear. Only one, she whispered back. I wish I could go back and tell that scared girl cleaning hotel rooms that she was already enough. That love would find her not because she needed saving, but because she was worth seeing. Late that night, in the honeymoon suite of the same hotel where they'd met, she wore his grandmother's ring and her mother's smile. Making love as husband and wife felt like coming home to a place they'd built together. Not just physical union, but spiritual partnership. 2 years ago, she knocked on his door expecting another entitled guest demanding midnight service. Instead, she'd found her future. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Comment below. What would you build if love gave you courage? Remember, the most powerful relationships don't change who you are. They reveal who you were meant to become. 5 years later, their foundation's anniversary celebration filled the community center built where his hotel once stood. Hundreds of families they'd helped gathered with their children, living proof that love, when it recognizes rather than rescues, creates legacies that last generations. Talia and Lucas's own children played in the center named after her mother, surrounded by the community that had watched their love story become Charleston's success story. Some fairy tales end with happily ever after. This one ended with, and the work continues.